Mad Max Fury Road was one of the best movies of 2015. With wildly original characters, punishing landscapes, and deadly consequences at every turn, writer-director George Miller makes use of every single second of its runtime and leaves audiences thirsty for more. But according to lead actress Charlize Theron, fans almost did get more of the film. The version she originally saw was significantly longer. In fact, she told audiences at a 2020 drive-in screening of the film that the first cut she saw was about 4 hours long. Miller has since clarified that most of the trimming was done merely to shave off extensions of scenes we actually did see in the film. But there are some key scenes that were almost very different or completely edited out. Here's a look at some Mad Max Fury Road scenes we never got to see. One scene that never made it to the big screen but was fully filmed was a massive rally featuring Immortan Joe and his group of war boys. Miller revealed during our interview with him in August 2020 that the scene was cut for time and story clarity at the suggestion of Fury Road's Oscar-winning editor Margaret Sixel, who had the job of whittling more than 400 hours of footage down to size. The scene would have taken place around the time when Furiosa and Max agreed to return to the Citadel instead of crossing the wasteland, when Immortan Joe and his minions were still in the desert lying in wait.
Immortan Joe was having this sort of big rally with his war boys. And they were thumping and chanting, they were thumping their vehicles and banging things together, and they were basically like a political rally.
Miller said that Sixel justified removing the scene because it would have meant more exposition, which had already been achieved in the first 2 acts of the film. While Miller was disappointed, he agreed with her call.
Which I was sort of a little bit upset about, just because we shot it. I like how we shot it.
There was another scene from that same section of the film that was also dropped by Sixel with Miller's blessing. In the theatrical version of the movie, after Furiosa and Max decide to march the war rig back to the Citadel, the film jumps from their handshake agreement straight to the shot of Immortan Joe humming. However, Miller originally had another quick scene he planned to unfold before the war rig officially returned. Miller said that this would have entailed Furiosa, Max, and Immortan Joe's wives, Nux and the Bovellini, bracing themselves for action on board the war rig.
Then we had a scene where the war rig arrives up on top of the hill above the wasteland. And we see that Max is there, he pops up through the roof with his binoculars, and he sees what's out there. You see the motorbike pull up alongside, and the character played by Megan Gale, Valkyrie, she's riding on the back of the motorbike, and they all look at each other ready for the battle.
In the end, though, Miller agreed with Sixel's decision to axe the scene, saying that the end result of cutting this scene and the rally scene was way better than it would have been. The on-set feud between Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron throughout the grueling production of Mad Max Fury Road is already legendary, but apparently Hardy's creative rifts did not end with his co-star. Even Sixel had problems with his performance throughout the post-production process. Sixel spoke to the New York Times as part of its extensive oral history on the film in 2020, and revealed that she had to work hard to piece together footage of his takes for the final cut because she thought his entire approach to certain key scenes was off.
It was hard to know who was more crazy. Me or everyone else.
As detailed in an excerpt from the interview, Sixel said that while she can now appreciate Hardy's work, audiences didn't get to see some really out-there things that she had to deal with in the dailies. Sixel explained, "He was sort of erratic in a way, so there was a big range in the performance. Even in the end chase, he was trying comedy, and we had to cut all that out and make it more serious." Luckily, Sixel had a handle on the desired mood for the movie and managed to cobble together the takes that actually worked. And you certainly can't argue with the results. Fans of Furiosa have a lot to look forward to when Miller takes us back in time to find out how she became such a fierce foe to Immortan Joe in the first place with the forthcoming Mad Max Fury Road prequel. Though Fury Road gave us some clues about her past, we got to see a lot more about Max's past than hers throughout the film.
It's okay. Sleep.
Apparently, we almost saw even more of his dark, twisted history before Sixel got into the editing booth. Speaking to Pro Video Coalition in 2016, Sixel explained that early test audiences for the movie wanted to know more about why Max had such a terrible disposition at the start of the film, which is what prompted her to add the opening sequence with his voiceover and those scattered glimpses of a little girl he failed to rescue before the events of Fury Road. However, Sixel said that only a handful of the shots she tried out for the film actually made it in. We experimented with flash or subliminal cuts to hint at past trauma. I tried many different ones. A few survived, including the lava shots when Max wakes up after the storm. Her choice to cut in those flashbacks was deliberate, and she also said it was her way of resisting pressures to incorporate a recap of the first 3 films in the series. There is very little love lost between Max and Furiosa when they decide to go their separate ways after she kills off Immortan Joe and takes over the Citadel. Though they become allies, there's nothing romantic about their bond. However, there is one subplot that involves former enemies finding something like love on the broken road. Capable develops an unlikely bond with Nux after discovering him hiding out on the war rig. In the original footage for the film, fans would have seen some more of Nux and Capable's impact on the film's grand finale. Sixel talked to Pro Video Coalition about the scene when Max and Furiosa decided to return to the Citadel, saying, "The first cuts of the scene gave more weight to Capable and Nux and not enough to Max. With some careful rewriting and editing, I managed to shift the focus back to Max." In other words, there's a version of this scene gathering dust in an editing bay closet which would have shown Nux and Capable being the real tragic heroes in the end. One scene that has not yet been committed to celluloid is what exactly happens after the movie's ending, when Furiosa has taken control of the Citadel. Miller has given audiences some hints about what he thinks is ahead for her, and it might not be the happy ending fans are hoping for.
There's 2 ways to go. One is utopian, which is not an interesting story, really.
More interesting, that she gets corrupted by her newfound power, an option based on a quote from famed mythologist Joseph Campbell.
Campbell said that the usual story is that today's hero becomes tomorrow's tyrant. The hero is the agent of change.
Right.
They basically relinquish self-interest in order for some common good.
Miller said that he suspects Immortan Joe was himself an agent of change once, and that Furiosa could fall into the same trap of tyranny. He thinks she's too smart for that to happen, but it's certainly a possibility. Whether he'll ever show us how he sees it all playing out for Furiosa after Mad Max Fury Road remains to be seen. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more New York Comic Con videos about your favorite movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.